Rail Rider, Mulan, and Spirited Away through a feminist lens, specifically how each film challenges gender expectations and reshapes what leadership can look like. Pei, Mulan, and Chihiro each face systems that restrict women's power, but across very different cultures and story worlds. These films argue that real authority doesn't have to come from masculinity, force, or inherited tradition. Instead, leadership can come from compassion, integrity, and resilience. What do a whale-tooth, a warrior, and a name tag have in common? In these films, each one becomes a symbol of a young woman's pushing back against patriarchy to become the leader she is meant to be. Mulan Pei earns the well-toothed necklace after repeated rejection, proving her right to lead. Mulan stops hiding and fights as herself, turning honor into truth instead of disguise. And Chihiro learns that names hold power, and remembering her own is how she survives. My thesis is through narrative and literary elements, cinematic technique, and cultural values and norms, these films show how compassion, integrity, and resilience function as forms of power that unsettle patriarchal definitions of who is allowed to lead. To prove this, I'll move through four lenses: narrative, literary, cinematic, and cultural context. First, narrative, how the stories build leadership through characterization and conflict. Pei is a bright, stubborn, and spiritually connected to her people, but she's constantly told that leadership is for boys. Her eternal conflict is surviving rejection without rejecting her culture back. Her external conflict is Koro's search for a male heir, even when Pei consistently shows a deeper understanding of tradition and a bond with the ancestral well. The narrative makes her leadership feel earned, not by force, but by devotion and endurance. Mulan is portrayed as naturally gifted and powerful, but her internal conflict is the pressure to suppress her true self to protect her family's honor. The external conflict begins when she disguises herself as a man to take her father's place, but it becomes most meaningful when she confronts the enemy as herself. Her arc frames leadership as choosing truth and responsibility over obedience and performance. Chihiro starts and afraid of change. Her internal conflict is fear and self-doubt. Her external conflict is surviving a world where identities are controlled, most clearly through the stealing of names. By working in the bathhouse, she becomes independent and courageous, but the film keeps her leadership quiet. She wins through steadiness, empathy, and moral clarity rather than dominance. Next, the literary layer, what the films emphasize through themes and symbols. Key themes include belonging, intergenerational conflict, and the tension between cultural continuity and patriarchal exclusion. The well itself symbolizes ancestral power and spiritual authority. When Pi ultimately connects with the well and the symbol becomes an argument, spiritual legitimacy and leadership can flow through care and responsibility, not just male secession. The film foregrounds self-acceptance, duty, and identity, showing how a gendered social order equates leadership with masculinity. Symbols like armor and chi highlight gender performance versus inner strength. When she stops hiding, the symbol of armor shifts. It is no longer proof of masculinity, but a tool she can wear without surrendering her identity. Themes include identity, exploitative labor, greed, and moral restoration. Symbols, especially names, water, and gold, show how corruption works. Names represent the self. Water points to cleansing and renewal. Gold tempts characters into losing their values. Chihiro's strength is that she refuses the gold and protects her name, which turns integrity into a survival skill. Third, cinematic technique, how each film visualizes and musically frames female power. The composition often feels intimate and mythic at once, while on-location landscapes and quiet framing to connect pay to ancestry and community. The music is subtle but spiritual, almost like a hidden character, reinforcing that her leadership is tied to balance, calm, and responsibility rather than spectacle. Visually, the film uses sweeping landscapes, bold color, and formal balanced framing. Even in action, the style is controlled, emphasizing emotion and purpose more than chaos. The orchestral score blends Western grandeur with Chinese instrumentation, presenting Mulan's power as both disciplined and graceful. The film's 2D animation creates deep focus and rich staging, so Chihiro is often shown small inside huge, overwhelming spaces. That visual scale makes her resilience more visible. The music, piano-driven nostalgia and sweeping themes, tracks her growth, letting quiet courage feel as epic as any battle scene. Finally, culture. Each film is shaped by a different set of values, and each shows how patriarchy can distort tradition. The Maori context in Rail Rider shows leadership is sacred and communal and linked to ancestry, stewardship, and responsibility. Cairo treats succession as fixed and male, but Pei's conformity isn't rejecting Maori culture, it's insisting that cultural duty should follow commitment, not gender. Her compassion toward the whales becomes a restorative act that exposes the difference between tradition and patriarchy's narrowing of it. The Chinese Confucian context in Milan shows family devotion, loyalty, social harmony, and honor matter deeply, but patriarchy narrows these ideals into obedience and silence for women. Milan's disguise reveals a system that only permits women's service through erasure. When she fights openly as herself, the film reframes honor and truth as responsibility, suggesting culture ideals can remain intact while expanding who is allowed to embody them. The Japanese Shinto Buddhist context in Spirited Away, the film draws on spirits, purification, disciplined labor, and balance with nature, and treats greed like contamination. The bathhouse enforces order through obedience and identity control, especially by taking names. Chihiro resists quietly. She holds on to her name, refuses no faces gold, and chooses care over transaction. Resilience and integrity become strength within a frame that values purification and moral steadiness. To close, I want to return to the thesis. Across narrative, symbolism, cinematic choices, and cultural context, these films show that compassion, integrity, and resilience are legitimate forms of power, and they disrupt patriarchal rules about who gets to lead. The unifying call to action across all three films is be authentic. Pei proves that destiny isn't gendered, Milan reclaims honor by choosing true over disguise, and Chihiro reclaims her name and her family by choosing kindness over greed. Just don't work within the system, transform it by refusing to compromise who you are. Thank you for listening, and hope you have a great summer.